Hello and welcome. I am Scrapperlock, and this is City of Heroes on the Rebirth server. We are with our brute level 30, almost level 31 Quintessence last. I didn't realize we were this close, or I would have just beaten up some random guys in the last episode and already leveled us up to 31 so we could get some new enhancement slots. But let's go ahead and call our contact and get our leveling up done in our next mission. He says, Part 4 of Crossing Over. You managed to save Walter Dashel, but it sounds like there are three mystics still in danger. I've located a large red cap ceremony in the spirit world. It seems likely that the mystics are there. Even if they weren't, you'd be likely to learn something about the red caps and their plans to subsume Salamanca. So let's go. And this is going to be presumably another outdoor mission where we are to save hostages and lead them out. My favorite kind, as you know. As you guys know, I like chatting about role-playing game stuff. One of the things, another thing beyond what I talked about last episode, which has to do with the verisimilitude of the world and how you want to make assumptions about the world that lead to it following the rules of the real world as much as possible so that people can like sort of get what's going on, and then you only vary it in the ways you need to get your magical or fantastical elements to work. This time, I want to talk a little bit. Instead of talking about that, I want to talk a little bit about the influence of pen and paper on MMOs, and in reverse, the influence of MMOs on pencil and paper games. I think that, obviously all MMOs owe their lineage to the pencil and paper games. City of Heroes is pretty much derived from EverQuest, which is basically derived from Dungeons and Dragons. If you sort of follow the trajectory of how things were built, MMOs and Zork and things like that led to City of Heroes. But it also owes its lineage to Champions. All of the developers of this game, the original developers, were Champions players, and one of the ideas they had was to kind of bring some Champions elements to the MMO world. And so this game owes a lot to pencil and paper role-playing games, and those role-playing games, in fact, are the reason this game exists. But it's also the case that pencil and paper role-playing games are now existing, the current ones, modern ones, exist in a world in which MMOs eventually came to sort of dominate the scene, and way more people play MMOs, have played MMOs over the years, especially games like World of Warcraft, Star Wars: The Old Republic, than ever played the pencil and paper versions of many of these games. And so I'm sure a lot more people played City of Heroes than ever played Champions, and a lot more people played World of Warcraft than ever played D&D. And and so a lot of the people who are coming to pencil and paper games now, I see a boss, so maybe there's a hostage here. A lot of people who are coming to pencil and paper games now, well, I don't see a hostage, but we're going to fight the boss. A lot of people who are coming to pencil and paper games now are folks who started and got a lot of experience in MMORPGs like City of Heroes or EverQuest, or most commonly World of Warcraft, maybe Star Wars: The Old Republic, Star Wars Galaxies. And so there's an MMO mentality, and I've actually discussed this before. If you go back and watch some of the Nightmare Last playthroughs, I talked about this. We've leveled up. There's a sort of an MMO mentality that some players get into. We didn't find the hostages? That's weird. We'll look at the clue in a second. And this MMO mentality is often based on essentially PvP, right? Balance is achieved in MMOs in part based on how the various characters and archetypes can do against each other, and you don't usually attack each other in a D&D game or a Champions game because you're not in an open world. You're not playing with 75 other players, 100, 200, 300 other players. It's you and three guys around the table with a DM. And so you don't have to balance the classes or the characters against each other. You're balancing them against the world, which is being created custom for you by the DM. But most people are used to this kind of thing where you're going up against a computer generated world that was created objectively by some developers, and they assumed certain things about your characters, like that you would have single origin enhancements by the time you're 30th level, and if you don't do that, you can't accomplish the game. Whereas if a GM is running it and knows you don't have single origin enhancements, he just scales down the villains, right? And so a lot of people have this mentality that is more of an MMO mentality, and they kind of expect their character and the game to work like an MMO works rather than like a pencil and paper game. We'll talk about that in a moment. We're too late. The ceremony is over. Salamanca is theirs. So now let's call Salinger, who says the Mystics weren't there. That's bad. What's worse, it sounds like the Redcaps are ready to suck Salamanca into Croatoa. You have to stop at Quintessence last. We're officially out of time, and here is the finale. But before we do the finale, let's go ahead and level up. And we're going to go to Warwitch, who was one of the nicest developers, maybe the nicest developer in City of Heroes. I'm going to talk a little bit more about this MMO versus... there's Sally. Sally is the Loch Ness Monster. I'll talk a little bit more about this whole MMO versus tabletop comparison in a little bit. So let's train up. So we get 3 slots. Yay, we're finally in 3-slot range. What do we want to do? We don't need anything in our pools. I think I want to finish Smite. Do we want to put Recharge on Energy Drain? I think we'll go ahead and slot Energy Cloak and stop there. Alright guys, I'm going to actually pause this. I'm going to go to the base and do some constructing of recipes, because we do have some damage. And I think we also have defense, right? So I'm going to go ahead and build these, and I will be back as soon as we're done, and we'll talk a little bit more about MMOs and pencil and paper and how they're different. Alright folks, we are back. And we'll call Buck again, and he tells us, according to the Redcaps, Salamanca is under attack right now. I need to get over there and stop it. There are 3 Mystics still under the Redcaps' control, Janet, William, and Gregory. I need you to find them and get them to the village fountain. Once there, they'll start working on a spell to banish the Redcaps from the village. I'll need you to protect the henge around the fountain, which keeps the village safe. Oh, this is going to be interesting. Don't know if we're going to be able to do this, guys, by ourselves. It depends on how quickly the attacks come. We'll see how we do. As we go, I guess I'll start talking about MMOs versus pen and paper, but I don't know how well I'm going to be able to do that. I may have to really concentrate on protecting the henge. We'll just have to see. It's a pretty big area. Hopefully, I'll be able to take it. You know, I'll be able to use my taunt and stuff to keep everybody focused on me and not on the hostages. We're going to have to go through this little by little and take out everybody in the area, because I just don't know where the hostages are going to be. This is the edge of the zone. Let's just go around the edges, and eventually we'll find hostages and save them. But I just don't know where the villains are going to be, and I don't know where the hostages are going to be, and I think we need to clear as much of this area as possible. Alright, so this is the edge of the zone. Cool beach over here if it weren't a friggin', nightmare place. There's a boss. And there's another boss. Let's taunt these guys out of here. So that must be one of the innocent people. So I'm going to actually go around. So while we do this, there's a fundamental difference, of course, between MMOs and tabletop, and that is that you have a dungeon master customizing your experience when you're playing tabletop, and you don't have a dungeon master customizing your experience in an MMO. And so, unfortunately, you get people worrying about optimizing, right? And it's fine if, as a player, you like to optimize, but there's this ridiculous myth among players, even in MMOs, that you must optimize or else, right? There are people who will kick you from their group. If you go back and listen to some of my earlier videos, I even pointed out that my own supergroup, not that they were being rude about it, wouldn't let you onto their incarnate trials if you didn't have the right loadout, the right enhancements for your character. And the reason was that they felt like, and maybe this is true, it probably is, they wouldn't be able to complete the the task force or trial if the everybody in the group didn't have the full maximum loadout, right? And if they didn't have everything everything maxed out to the best of their ability, everything to the nth degree maxed out. And so in that case you probably need it, but in a lot of other cases you really don't. You don't have to have sets. You don't have to have the sets that the internet says are the best sets in City of Heroes in order to survive the game. But even if you did in City of Heroes, you certainly wouldn't need it in Dungeons and Dragons, because there's a dungeon master, and the dungeon master can, choose to go easy on you. The dungeon master can customize the experience to your build. You're also not playing with a bunch of anonymous people on the internet, I hope. You're playing with your friends, or at least that's what you're supposed to be doing, or playing with people you're familiar with in Adventurers Club. And those folks aren't going to treat you like an anonymous stranger the way folks on the internet in World of Warcraft or Star Wars The Old Republic, or heaven forbid a pickup group in City of Heroes, would treat you. Right? Those people don't know you. They randomly picked your name out of a looking for group list, and said, yeah, you can join our group because you want to do the same mission we're doing. You're only in it together for 15, 20, 30 minutes, a half hour, maybe an hour, and then you're never going to see each other again. And that's a very different sort of a setting from an adventure group in Dungeons & Dragons, where you're going to meet every week, play for 4 hours at a time, play for every week for a year. It's a totally different circumstance, and you don't need to be this super optimized guy in a setting like that, because you're playing with a bunch of friends and nobody cares if your character isn't optimized. Nobody's going to kick you from the group, and nobody should kick you from the group. It should be perfectly fine if you're not optimized. And again, the DM can customize your experience. So if if your character maybe isn't super strong, or if your character maybe doesn't have a great armor class, the DM can deal with that. I mean, in the old days, we would, like if you were a DM of old school, AD&D, you knew that the wizard only had die 4 hit points and a pretty crappy armor class, so you'd right away give the party early on some sort of, we got to take our stealth off here. You'd give the party some sort of armor class magic item, a ring of protection or something, to help the wizard with his armor class, so that he wouldn't die right away. Or you'd give him a periaptive wound closure so that he could heal up from the wounds. You might give him some kind of a cloak or something that helps him. The idea is, as a dungeon master, you're not going to just slaughter the characters. You're going to tune the experience so that the players will have a good time. Whereas in an MMO, they're not tuning the experience. They're setting it up a certain default way, and if your character doesn't match with what the developers expected you to do, then you're not going to be able to do it. And so it's a completely different situation, and you're building kind of for a 100% different circumstance. And so you shouldn't try to build characters in D&D as if it's an MMO. And I think this happens a lot. You'll get people saying, "Oh, you shouldn't play a ranger because they're underpowered." Well, even if they are, who cares? Who is going to notice the underpoweredness? It's you and your 3 friends. Oh, rangers are underpowered compared to paladins. Well, if there's no paladin in the group, who gives a damn? Right? We have a sorcerer in our group. Sorcerers are underpowered compared to bards or wizards. Well, again, who cares? Oh, we got a boss here. Interesting. Let's try putting some fear on him. Oh, no, we've been blinded. So, yeah, sorcerers are supposedly weak compared to wizards. Well, we don't have a wizard in our party, so who cares? Right? So the sorcerer is weak compared to some theoretical character that might exist in another campaign if we weren't playing the campaign we're playing? Like, who gives a damn? Right? Again, if it's in the real world, if it's in an MMO and you're playing with, people who aren't your friends and they're going to be mean to you and not want to play with you if you are not super maximized, then I would argue you don't want to play with people like that. But if you have no choice, because that's what the pickup groups are like, then yeah, you have to worry about whether you're optimized. But if you're just playing with your friends or just playing with a couple of neighbors or something, you don't have to worry about whether you're optimized. It's not going to make the game stink. The GM is fully capable of customizing the game to your experience, right? Customizing the game to make it fun for you and the other players, right? Just like the GM will, if they know that you like a lot of hack and slash, will make a lot of combat, and if they know you'd prefer not to have a lot of hack and slash, could make very little combat, depending on what everybody wants to do. So there's a huge difference between how you have to build characters and play in an MMO versus how we build characters and play in a tabletop role-playing game. And I think a lot of people who come up with build guides, a lot of people who talk about which classes are stronger and weaker than which other classes, are thinking about it from the perspective of an MMO, where this kind of thing is really important. And that's true in a video game, but in a role-playing game that's tabletop, no, you don't have to worry about that. You really don't. And I think a lot of players are very used to the video game mentality, and consequently, they think like they're playing a video game when they're playing tabletop. And so my suggestion is to get out of that mentality and not to listen to the people who are in it, because they're thinking about it in a way that really doesn't make sense for a pencil and paper role-playing game, because the pencil and paper game has a DM, right? It's you're not just playing it on the computer, and you're not just playing it with a bunch of random strangers who are comparing your build to everybody else on the internet, right? You're just playing with your friends. And really, nobody cares how optimized your character is. There seems to be this belief, this fear, and it's completely irrational, that if your character isn't optimized, that somehow you're going to lead to party wipes. It's simply ridiculous. Well, I aggroed this boss while I'm fighting somebody else from behind there. Yeah, I didn't see the guy behind me. We should be alright, though. Going after the boss first, because I want to keep him debuffed. But I am going to go around him and see if I can AoE these guys. That's what I like. You guys are going to rue the day when you challenged Quintessence last. And there's... Oh, I thought there was another guy. Okay, so we're going to head over here. Now this is the way to do an outdoor zone. It's small. It's big enough to feel like an outdoor zone. It looks really cool. It's very well designed, but it's not ridiculously huge. There are a few fights to do in between where the hostages are. You get the hostages, you run them over here, and it's all good. I think this is, if all their outdoor zones were this size and designed like this, I would love outdoor missions. It's just the endlessness of some of them that I object to. And there are some red caps. I don't know what these guys are doing here. I didn't think they were supposed to ambush us until after the other guys were here. So now we have to wait 15 minutes and protect the henge. Where are you? Okay. I'm hopeful that this is a regular ambush setup and ambushes will come straight after me. So yeah, I mean, you really don't need to worry about MMO considerations when you're playing a tabletop game. Yes, I know. They're very, very similar stylistically to each other as games, and the really good the really good MMOs do a really good job of mimicking the tabletop games. But they're not tabletop games. Oh boy, these guys are attacking this thing now. And they've done a lot of damage to it too. There's some more. If they attack from multiple spots, there really isn't anything I can do about that. Try to aggro. Yeah, see, there are guys on the other side too. I can't stop them all. So we may fail this mission, we'll see. Where are the other guys? Oh, there's somebody. Okay. These guys are way off to the side, it looks like. "12 minutes to go." Man, this is going to be long. Alright, let's go intercept this guy. Always 2 misses in a row. How are these henges doing? That one's taken the most damage. Mostly trying to aggro these guys. Okay. Looks good so far. Okay, well, if they're only going to spawn here, that's actually pretty good. Yeah, one of the people on the thread was talking about damage per round, right? DPR, and of course, the equivalent of that here is DPS. And he talked about how in MMOs, a lot of times, what people care about is DPS, right? How much damage per second your character does. And we've certainly seen that in City of Heroes, where the whole concern is how much DPS does you do as a brute. And, you know, SOs don't allow you to do as much DPS as sets, so your character is horribly hopeless because you don't have enough DPS, because that's all that matters, right? But we've seen with multiple of my characters that DPS isn't the be-all and end-all, and sometimes having some utility powers like the ones we have here that allow us to gain endurance or allow us to gain health can be actually more useful than just straight damage per second. But, you know, DPS is one of the main, what's the word, hallmarks of whether your character is good or not. And in MMOs and in D&D, they talk about damage per round and how rangers aren't as good as paladins because paladins do more damage per round under a bunch of generic assumptions that may or may not be true about the individual characters you're talking about. But rangers have a lot of utility as well, and maybe some of the utility of the ranger isn't doing straight damage per second in regular rounds of combat, but is going to help the party, you know, get through the woods and find the enemy quickly and save them a week's worth of rations because they didn't get lost, and maybe help them track an enemy or have bonuses against that enemy. There are all kinds of reasons why the ranger might be more useful to have than the paladin, even if it's not doing as much DPS, right? And so often we've seen in this game, which is an MMO, that utility is important, and in a pencil and paper game, even more so, because this game doesn't have any role-playing in it. But in a pencil and paper game, your character's ability to persuade, deceive, and have insight into the thoughts of others can be extremely important. And so, yeah, it works very differently. And damage per second, damage per round isn't really the only thing that matters. So I think that it's very important not to get caught into an MMO design mindset when you're thinking about pencil and paper. And it's also really important not to think like pencil and paper when you're designing a character in an MMO, right? Because you don't have a DM, and so you have to realize that the game will be hard on you. It will, you know, my postdoc advisor always used to say the thing about computers is they do exactly what you tell them to do. Usually she would say this when I, you know, made some sort of a programming mistake, and I, you know, wanted them to do one thing, and it was the computer was doing something else because I misprogrammed it. And she says, "Yep, the computer tells you does exactly what you tell it to do." And similarly, in an MMO, the computer is going to do exactly what the developers told it to do, and it won't have any mercy on you. It won't say, "Well, this person's a new player and can't afford SOs, so I won't. So I'll go easy on them and reduce the difficulty of the villains." It doesn't do that the way a DM would. So you have to build for optimization much more so in an MMO, and you can't assume mercy or good DMing or anything like that to help your character. It won't happen in an MMO. So it's important to remember which game are you playing, and not to try and design a character for an MMO the way you would design one for a tabletop game, and not to try to design a tabletop character the way you would design an MMO character. So we have 6 minutes to go. Here comes a lieutenant. Wow, double misses in a row. This character has like an 80% chance to hit against those guys too. That sword's cool. Sword animations are another thing I really like. Katana and, or whatever it's called, the ninja sword, and broadsword are very cool. As is dual blades. And that heal is super awesome. It's very useful. 4 minutes to go. 4:50. 5 minutes, really. So I hope you guys have enjoyed this story arc. Not sure if there are any others in Kroto. I think there is at least one more. Another miss. Swing and a miss. 4 minutes and 18 seconds ago. So I'm basically taking care of a spawn every like 30 to 40 seconds. Feel like somebody's missing. Yeah, there's the third guy. Let's make sure they all focus on me. Get that aggro up. There we go. So mathematically here, it's looking like we have maybe 5 more spawns after this. All right, 3 minutes to go. Fortunately, they seem to keep coming from the same area. So not much chance of them getting past me if they're going to keep coming from there. I'm surprised that they didn't have more of them coming from other angles and force you to like go to this side, go to that side, but I think it's maybe it's just too close to the edge of the map. Ah, one of them turned into a lieutenant. That doesn't happen often. I wonder what determines that. Is it just random? Or does it have to do with, like, how many hit points they have when you knock them out? Like, is it if you just barely knock them out that they turn into a lieutenant, but if you, like, really beat them up so that they go into the deep into the negative health, then they don't? Or vice versa, maybe? I don't know. One and a half minutes left. I would say 3 more spawns, maybe? 2 to 3. There's one. Yep, probably 2 more. Next spawn. I am missing a lot, I feel like. Yep, there's 41 seconds left, so we'll finish this spawn. The next one will be it, I think. Because it takes about 30 seconds to take out a spawn. So this should be it, guys. 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And that is the end of the mission. We got some reward merits, and we can head out. So let's call our contact, who says, I have to tell you something, Quintessence last. According to the mystics, their spell never went off. Just at the moment of completion, some other power tapped into the mystic energy they were creating. The mystics never meant to kill their redcaps, just to remove them from Salamanca. Someone else's hand is at work here. What's worse, the mystics tell me that the spell nearly eliminated them too. I've got a good idea who's behind it, and they may well intend damage only to the redcaps themselves, but according to my colleague, that spell could have drastic effects for all magical life, good creatures, magicians, even magic origin heroes. If the Cabal is behind it, we have to stop them. I'd say we've achieved a certain level of trust. Need any more enhancements? So interesting, we don't have another contact here. Nope. I guess that's it for the Croatoa arc. Let me pause here, and I'm just going to double check and see if there are other contacts, because I could have sworn there was one more. Well, that looks like it's it, guys. I guess we have finished the Croatoa arcs. I don't see any more listed in the Paragon Wiki. So we can head back to the monorail, and we're now done with Salamanca, with Croatoa. So we're going to go back to our regular story arcs, which will be in Brickstown and Founders Falls. But I guess we will do that next time, since we're at well over half an hour. I hope you guys have enjoyed. I certainly have. Until next time, I am Scrapperlock, and this is City of Heroes on the Rebirth server.